This is the East Lyme Inland Wetlands Commission. My name is Gary Upton. Today is, please tell me if I mess up and say the wrong date, Jen. That's when you're welcome to jump in. It's March, right? Everyone agrees? Hello, stop it. March 8th, 2021. We have in attendance Kristen Chantrell, Jason Diebel, Phyllis Berger, myself, Doreen Ryan, and we don't have any alternates this evening present, correct? Anyone tell me I'm wrong? Good, thank you, Jason. You're great with that stuff. We have Mr. Paul Daigle. I almost called you Mr. Ball Daigle. Mr. Paul Daigle, a hat threw me off, Paul. And Sue Spang is here as our recording secretary. If you make a motion, please work with myself and Sue to make sure that she gets it down correctly. Mr. Gary Gaishel, Jen Lindo, both town staff. And it's a pretty light meeting, I suppose, right? I'm gonna hop back and forth on this computer to see if it wants to be my friend. Boom, boom, boom. iMac is acting up a little bit. So additions to the agenda this evening, right from the top. We've done our call to order. Do we have any additions to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I have one to add under new business.
Mr. Gaishel, thank you. Yes.
It's the application of Chris Cassidy of Hull Forest Products, Inc. for a timber harvest operation at property owned by John Bialowans Jr. at 57 Walnut Hill Road, East Lyme, Connecticut. I don't see Mr. Cassidy in the audience. Being that we're taking this up from the floor and adding it to the agenda as new business, we can't vote on it anyway, as it has to remain on the agenda for 15 days statutorily. So this would just start the clock ticking. And as they're hoping to get going in the spring, I'm thinking we have 4 weeks between now and the next meeting, and I think we can actually render a decision on that and then in April. So if there's any other questions, be happy to add that to new business.
So we have a new application for forestry operation. Mr. Bialowans is the land owner. I
Correct.
Understand. Okay. And this wasn't on our original agenda.
Correct.
Okay.
Need a 2/3 vote of the sitting commission to.
Okay. In consideration, it would be my opinion, in consideration of things of this matter. You know, one of the things we spoke about with some other updates to our regulations was making postage for applications like planning and zoning does. Ms. Berger was a big proponent for that. And I think we do need to get back to that, but I think we're all a bit worn out from regulations talk. Speaking for myself, it seems, I would personally, I'll keep it short and sweet. Mr. Daigle will say, Mr. Chair, make a motion or do something or shut up. I would make a motion that this new business be moved to our next meeting and be posted on an agenda in compliance with the required notice for such. I can shorten that up if that makes any sense. As the chair, I'm making a motion to keep things neat and orderly. We have new business. It's whether it's a new house or a pool or forestry. I think that we should have this application posted on an agenda prior to a meeting.
Fair enough.
So that is the motion.
Gary, you don't need to have a motion. You're not adding it to your agenda tonight.
Okay. So don't add it to our agenda?
I thought that's what your statement was. You didn't want to add it to your agenda for this evening.
I just want to make sure that I'm not making a unanimous decision to do so, but you're saying I can.
No, what I'm saying is you don't need a motion not to add it.
Okay.
The rest of the agency can speak on their preference.
Okay.
They may be able to make a motion if they want to add it to the agenda.
All right. So we have four other people in line. Does anyone else want to discuss this or talk about it? Anyone want to add it to the agenda this evening?
I just want to say I agree. I think we need at least 24 hours to post something like that before the meeting. You know, I know some people check the meeting minutes on Friday, see nothing's going on, so they're not here today. So I think in all fairness, we should just save it to not add it to the agenda today. So I agree.
I would like to also say I agree, but I also want to keep in mind that these people are, making business transactions and trying to line up their lives based on our shenanigans, and that we should move post haste to make sure that everything gets taken care of quickly and orderly. So while I am in favor of moving it to the next agenda, I think we should perhaps prioritize it for next time.
I agree with that. Prioritization and just making it as quick as we can.
Would this be something that we would want to do like a special meeting for it, so that we could try to help them out if they're kind of crunched for time? I don't know if this is something worthy of a special meeting, or just throwing that out there too.
Doreen, my response to that, I think, would be, when did we hear about this application?
I got it a couple of weeks ago. I reviewed his application. He sent it to me wondering if he needed an application, felt he had an exempt activity because it's an agricultural use. In reviewing his application, I noted that there was a stream crossing and advised him that we would require a permit for that crossing, while all the other activities would be exempt, provided he's not stumping or grinding stumps or anything like that, which he indicated he was not. So the only regulated activities I believe are associated with the operation is the stream crossing itself, which in past history with other operations we've permitted in the past. So I think it's consistent to require a permit for the crossing. That said, I don't know their specific timeline. I just know they want to get going in the spring. Again, going off to April, May, probably wouldn't, I don't know their financial situation, but I don't think it's going to upset the apple cart. They'll be able to continue to do their work. And again, we're talking about a stream crossing. So keep in mind that activity you would probably want done during a low flow season. That's usually July, August. So I think in time wise, I think it'll work out.
Does that answer your question, Doreen? I'm just looking at the timeline. I don't want us to feel too bad that we're delaying the guy per se, if this is something we found out about this morning. I agree we should be quick. We shouldn't get in the way of people's work. Guys try to make a living off of this. I mean, I'm actually in favor of looking over what he's looking to do. It's 43 cords approximately of material, or 50 cords, less than 50 cords over 43 acres. It's not that many trees. It's not that much. It's probably just a way to make a couple extra grand. But we've had situations where people come up, they can't talk at our public hearings, or we have public hearings, like the situation with Mel Weiss on Roxbury Road, and the neighbors feel upset with us, and they're going, you guys are passing this through without telling us. And I just think my opinion is that it's fair to be even and disclose to the public so that people know, and no one feels, what do they say, bamboozled or something like that? I forget what the word was. So that's my opinion. Now you're muted. I can't, Jen, can you unmute her?
So is the applicant here, or the individual doing work?
No.
Then I think we can wait until next month. They may, I would think that they would be here if they were concerned about it.
Logical. All right, so can we move on? Everyone's okay to move on? Yes. Public hearings. Thankfully, none. Public delegations, if any member of the public is here that might have anything to say. This is a time when members of public are invited and welcome to speak to the commission about certain matters. Keeping in mind issues or concerns related to approved wetlands permits and in-house proposals or general topics of discussion are open to comment. Agenda items, things on our agenda, referrals, applications subject to a decision by the commission, a public hearing, or in litigation may not be discussed. The members of the commission will not directly answer questions or make comment during delegation. Ms. Lindo, is there anyone else knocking on the window trying to get in to come and talk to us? Probably not, right?
No.
Great, thank you. So no one has any comment for public delegation before I move on? All right. Acceptance of the minutes from our prior meeting on February 8th, 2021. I'll be honest, I always count on Phyllis for her study of those minutes. And to take a quick look over them, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Before we begin, I just wanted to say I noticed a minor error that I don't know if it should be corrected or not, but it just jumped out at me. At the top of page 2, Pastor Randy Hyde is listed as Paster.
We might want to fix that.
I think the intent maybe will convey, right? With the misspelling.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I thought it was humorous.
Nice catch, Mr. Diebel. You're not a school teacher, are you?
Math teacher.
Oh, that's a really good one for you. Anyone have anything else? All right.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting
As amended.
as amended.
Sue, I'll second it. Phyllis Berger.
Oh, okay.
Any further discussion, questions, other than the paster to pastor? All in favor, show of hands. Gary Upton, Phyllis Berger, Kristen Chantrell, Jason Diebel, Doreen Ryan, all in favor. Motion passes. Thank you, guys. Moving on from here, the ex officio report, Mr. Paul Daigle. Thank you for your sensibility and not needing to vote for something not to vote on. I appreciate it.
No problem. Board of Selectmen has been pretty well tied up with the budget process this year. We approved our budget at the last meeting. Don't quote me on these numbers. I wrote them down, but a combined school, town and Board of Education budget of $78,791,609, which is a 3.41% increase. And the reason I say we removed some money in our meeting, about 125,000 we took off the first selectman's proposed budget based on some changes since it was first presented to us. And the school Board of Education budget is $52,803,380. So I believe that's being presented to the Board of Finance at their meeting this week, and they'll start their deliberations on that. I don't have the numbers with me, but there was a significant increase in the grand list for the town this year, with properties like Costco coming on at fully tax value and a couple other major items. So don't know what the end up mill rate's going to be, but once the Board of Finance takes their action on the budget, then the town will be able to determine what the mill rate will be. So, but bottom line, going to the Board of Finance, it's a 3.41% increase over last year's budget, combined between the town and the Board of Education. The only other thing to report is the public safety building is progressing well, ahead of schedule. There's been some social media discussion about some unknowns and the building not being a good building. The two items that were identified, one was non-fire rated drywall in the hallways, which had to be replaced. And there was one other item, I'm sorry, I don't recall, but those have been adjudicated. The drywall's being replaced. And the town water supply was hooked up last week, excuse me, today's Monday. So progressing very well. Contingency money's been used on a few things to cover that extra drywall work, also to replace ceilings. When the drywall has to come down, the ceiling grid gets impacted. So the entire first floor is going to have new ceilings as well. So far so good, and could be as early as June, maybe July, where all the work is completed. Pending any questions from the agency members, that's all I had to report tonight.
When do you think they'll get them in there, the police?
The contracted schedule is August, and like I said, it could be as early as June, if not the beginning of July. based on where they're at right now.
All right. There you go. Thank you, Mr. Daigle.
You're welcome.
New business, none. Obviously. Pending applications. We have with us this evening, I believe, Mrs. Wendy Richardson over there. Wendy, you're on mute just in the moment, so you might want to unmute yourself. And I do see another phone call popping in there. Jen, you just let someone in, right? So Patagonia Lake, East Lyme Patagonia Lake Association, care of Wendy J. Richardson, President, applicant, request for an extension of a permit 16-6, which expires on May 2nd, 2021, to perform hydro raking at or around Patagonia Lake and deposit the soils on adjacent properties. I know that what did we discuss, guys, last time? We did say we wanted, what did we say, Mr. Gaishel? Do you recall what we had decided?
I think you were going to just take it up and discuss it and talk to the association directly. I think that's Wendy's here.
Mhm.
I gave you copies also. You should have copied, there was posted materials of the previously issued permit.
Mhm.
I don't know if you want, I can go ahead and read that for you if you like, but previously we had permitted the activity of performing hydro raking at or around Patagonia Lake and depositing the spoils on the adjacent properties at or around Patagonia Lake, or legally disposing of the spoils off-site. There were a number of conditions with that, approximately 8. Everything from notifying the enforcement officer 2 days prior to the beginning the raking, as well as for a final inspection when it was completed. Obviously, they must not have completed all of the raking. And when we issued the permit, as I recall, there was an intent that this would be an ongoing process, as it's just lake management. And I think Wendy could probably speak further to that. So if there's any other questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Mr. Gaishel, I noticed that in section 4 of the conditions, obviously, because this is a prior approved permit, it cites our 100-foot regulated area. At what point, obviously, as an extension of a prior application, I would presume that that 100-foot review area would remain in place, correct?
That's correct. I know with the application, none of the work was actually proposed beyond a few feet from the shore's edge.
Right.
So it's well within the 100 and 300-foot upland review area.
Right. Logically, just something that popped out at looking at the page quickly. All right, so shall we hear from Mrs. Richardson at this time? Is that okay?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Good, thank you. I think there was just a consensus amongst the commission. I think at our last meeting, more of us were here last time, but just to kind of hear what's going on, familiarize ourselves. I don't believe that any of us, maybe other than Phyllis, were on the commission at the time that this application might have gone through. So, presuming this application this is the last time it could be renewed, I believe, Mr. Gaishel?
That's correct. And at the end of the 5-year period, they'd have to reapply for a new permit.
Okay. So I think we all just kind of wanted to stick our eyeballs on it really quick and get to meet you and talk to you, if that's okay. Please don't think I don't think anyone's interested in stopping you from limiting Phragmites and, issues that you guys have. I just want to, personally, I'm just kind of curious what's going on and look forward to meeting you.
Well, it's lake management, as Gary said, and pretty much we have a lake that's full of a lot of mud around the shoreline, and therefore it's constantly, unless you could actually get down to the lake bed, you would stop all that nasty stuff from growing. So it's just a hydro raker comes in, everybody pays for the hydro raker, and the spoils get dumped on our properties, and then we pay again to have the spoils either dug up and buried in our property or taken around and put on plants and used as mulch. And yeah, and we had about, I don't know, maybe 25 homeowners this year jumped aboard and paid quite a lot of money to carry on.
And it looks like it's done by Solitude Lake Management LLC out of, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Out of Virginia, they come up to from Virginia?
Yeah, well, they're all over the place. Usually they come down from Mass.
Okay. And Mr. Geisler, is there any, I'm sorry, Wendy, I don't mean to jump to Gary.
It's okay.
Are there, I guess I would ask you, Wendy, are there any, aggrieved neighbors that give you guys any trouble doing this, or generally everyone's on board to do this?
Everyone's on board.
Mr. Geisler, you don't have anyone that's griping and sending us correspondence about this stuff?
No, over the course of the operation thus far, I've received only one phone call regarding the hydro raking, and that there was material floating in the pond. I think part of their permit does require them to use a turbidity curtain, if you will, and that would catch any floating plant debris. But that's seasonal based on when that material can reseed and be problematic. So based on the time of year that I received the phone call, it's my presumption that there was no need for the curtain at that time because there's no seed material floating or able to float.
Oh, understood. So there was crap floating in the pond, the lake, but it's not actually seedable, spreadable, et cetera.
Correct.
Gotcha. So someone sees something and complains, but probably doesn't understand the science of it.
Correct. Unfortunately, I didn't have a number to return that phone call. So, but assuming that was only one phone call over the course of 5 years, that's pretty good.
All right. Any other agency members have questions here? Abel?
I'm curious about something Phyllis said last time about incineration, as that had to be part of the equation at some point in the history of hydro raking. It hasn't come up since she said it, but I was just curious if anyone had any knowledge of that or understanding or context, like what has to be incinerated, what time of year does it have to be incinerated? Does anything have to be incinerated, or is it simply enough to bury it and mulch it?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm kind of familiar with it because we have a pond in our neighborhood, and we had the hydro raking done a number of years ago. And I know when we came before the board then, we ended up putting it in those large containers, and they took it away to some place that did incinerate it. But it's an ongoing problem. And I know as far as Patagonia Lake, I'm thinking that most of the houses around there are all on septic, which I don't think helps it. And then, you've got people who use fertilizers, which just kind of aggravate the whole situation.
So Phyllis, was the stuff that you're referring to typical like piles of Phragmite, whereas it sounds like a lot of what?
No.
Okay.
It wasn't so much the Phragmites. You've got milfoil and, you get the leaves that come into the pond and they just kind of build up.
Right.
And there's probably algae and maybe other things that are in there.
Well, yeah, true. They don't have a saltwater, freshwater crossover up there either, do they? So it's all
No.
Interesting. So Wendy, do you want to speak to that?
With the incinerator piece, I didn't know we could even do that. Gary, could we really do that?
You can send it to an incinerator. There's a substantial cost involved. And my guess is just the volume of material coming out of Patagonia Lake versus the lakes down by Phyllis, it's much smaller. So the volume is much less. So it may be economically more feasible to send that to an incinerator. But the only options that you have is either incinerate it or dispose of it on site. Deep won't let
Yeah.
you.
I didn't know, because sometimes there are people who haven't been able to have anything done because there's nowhere for them to put it. So
Correct.
maybe if I could offer that as an option to them, they could investigate. So that's good to know.
Yes. Yeah.
I would just advise them that they are not the ones that are actually incinerating it, that it is done professionally at offsite.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Deep has strict guidelines on the disposal. So, yeah.
All right. So the prior application was and approval was May 2nd, 2016. It looks like it's Exhibit D, right? It's got a bunch of conditions. And I suppose the right thing to do is to extend this application based upon that prior approval.
I just have a quick question real quick. quick question, The maps that are in the Patagonia Lake map that we have, and it has all the circled properties, are those the properties that are participating in the removal of any sedimentation on their property? Is that who's involved in this?
Those were all the properties that were involved in the previous approval. That's correct. And they broke it down into the number of hours each property was paying for at that time. But as we heard Wendy tonight say, at this point, there was only 25 lots who would be contributing.
Okay. I was wondering if it was a significant difference from initial to now of properties that are participating.
It seems to be about half.
Okay.
It's expensive, Kristen.
That, yeah, I have no idea how much it
No,
costs.
it's $200 an hour to have them come and take it off of your property, and then you have to pay somebody to come to your property, and so I mean, it's expensive.
Wow. So the people, I'm asking out of curiosity. So the people that are having this done, then they're responsible for it potentially being buried on their property.
Yes,
Okay, got it.
yes,
Yeah, that does add up then.
fast, yeah. Year
So-
after year.
Kristen, is the map you're referring to the thing that says 6 Wood Drive, 10 Wood Drive? And then
Yeah.
that one, because that's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 23 people circled, I believe, 23, 24, if I count quickly.
Yeah, and then there's a page 2 with even more, with a lot more.
Oh, I see. Interesting.
That was from that's Patagonia Lake from 5 years ago?
Yeah, that was under Tom Davis when he was president. They had both the north and south ends of the lake participated in that in making this application.
Oh, in the application, but they actually did work?
I believe they did. I know I saw a hydro rake up on the north end of the lake.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Not to say that it's a code, but I do see that of the properties that are circled, what it looks like for potentials, you only have half or so of them that have hours allocated. So I would presume that if someone was using this for a quote, those are the people that might have done something, Who knows?
Where are you seeing this map?
Under our tonight's,
Map in the with the permit that was on the materials for today.
Yeah, it says Patagonia Lake maps.
I just dropped it in the chat.
Oh, okay. I'll see if that's what I'm looking at.
But sorry, I distracted. So Gary, I know where you were going. You can continue to go to extend the permit.
Yeah, so, but I want to does anyone else have any questions? I feel like, we're familiarizing ourselves with this to approve this for another 5 years, which gets us to what, 2016, 26? And then these guys can carry on their merry way and have whoever wants to participate annually at the appropriate time of year to keep mitigating this crap in the lake. Yeah, that's the concept. Sounds about right. So I'd be curious if, do we hear a motion to potentially approve, or how are we feeling?
I'll make a motion.
All right,
I'm
Mr.
making a
Lebo?
motion that we approve the application.
The extension of the application.
Yes, thank you.
Yep. And a second?
Yeah, Kristen Chantrell, I'll second.
All right, Jason Diebel, seconded by Kristen Chantrell. Is there any further questions or discussion at this time?
No.
All right, and obviously, continuing on, I believe we would want that motion to, if I might ask Mr. Diebel, to simply extend the prior approval, which had a variety of conditions that involved our wetlands agent, compliance with DEEP, and all those types of things.
Yes, I make a motion to extend the application.
Yep. All right. All in favor of such, by a show of hands, myself, Gary Upton, Phyllis Berger, Kristen Chantrell, Jason Diebel, and Doreen Ryan. The motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Richardson, for your patience. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll see you. Maybe we'll see you again. Maybe someone else will see you again.
Okay, 5 years. All right, bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And let me back over here. Old business. There is none. Chairman's report. I don't have anything to report, but I would just mention a little bit of, we might want to consider when we might take a tackle at that posting. I know that was probably our only other big thing we were concerned about for our regulations. When we were making our not the only thing, but one of the keynote pieces when we were talking about changing our upland review area. I know, looking back on our conversation, please anyone stop me if I'm wrong, but my remembrance was that we had felt it was significant to put up some kind of sign postage for when something was happening in a wetland on a property. I would say we should scratch at that at some point. How do you guys feel about adding that to maybe next month's agenda just to talk about? Anyone? I don't think it's a huge thing. I don't think it's going to be like the upland review area.
So I have a question. So aren't we, by doing that, let's say for a public meeting, posting it, are we doing the same thing that zoning does? Don't they post theirs?
Yeah, it would be the concept, right? Just
So-
we'd probably want to grab some of the language that we'd post a sign that was X amount of inches wide by
Right.
X amount of inches tall with a font size that is whatnot, and it needs to be out on this date for this amount of time. And I'm sure Mr. Gaishel can help us find that language and keep it pretty cut and dry and simple, because it's procedurally happening anyway, right?
So, I mean, for me, isn't it just kind of being consistent with zoning? They have a public hearing, they post it. We have a public hearing, we post it.
Yeah, on street curbside, right? I mean, that's
Right.
rather than the day newspaper that, I don't know, I don't.
Hardly anybody reads.
I don't know the last time I saw one of those. Actually, I think I got a free one the other day with the announcement of March 19th, things being lifted and whatnot, but yeah, but that's yes, I believe you and I are on the exact same page. That's my understanding of our intent, would be to put up a cheap little sign on the property so that we didn't have someone coming in going, who's putting in 5 houses? I didn't know about that. You people are pushing things through. That whole thing we've dealt with.
So for Mr. Gaishel, because you're probably familiar with zoning and how they do theirs, who pays for that sign?
The applicant.
The applicant pays for it.
Yep.
Do you see an issue with that, us being consistent with them?
No. It's just more public notice. So I think the courts would favor that.
Okay. So, I mean, I would like to make a motion that we put it on the agenda for next month.
All right.
If I need one.
So procedurally, let's try and remember how we did all that, right? We're going to need to double back down. So we've got a motion to put it on the agenda to talk about an update to our regulations, right? Being at our normal meeting, which we'll need to post, because technically, after we do that, that would have to go to public hearing. So sorry, Kristen, you said something. I apologize.
Oh, no, I was just seconding that we can add it to the agenda. To
All
discuss
right.
Next meeting.
All right. So we have a motion on, Mr. Daigle, go ahead.
I may be wrong, but I don't think you need a motion to put something on your agenda. But you can just
Okay.
ask Gary to put it on your agenda and you can have your conversation. Of course, if it's gonna change your regulations, then you're gonna eventually have to have a public hearing and so on and so forth. But it can be new business for the agency to discuss. You're not gonna be taking any action, but you're collecting data, I think, to understand how you would want to create, that requirement in your regulations. Gary, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct, Mr. Daigle. And if there's any other changes to the regs, it might be a good kind of put them all together, because if you have to go through the process of a public hearing, you might as well hit them all while you can to just be efficient. But other than that, I'll be happy to put language together. You can basically cut and paste from planning and zoning, and you can look at both sets of regs and kind of pick and choose what you think would be appropriate. Usually the posting of a sign is kind of coincides with the first posting of the legal ad in the paper. So about 15 days prior.
Mr. Gaishel, do you see anything else that we should be looking at?
Not at this time. Again, I think during the previous application to increase the upland review area, I added the suggestion of looking at low impact development standards. You may want to consider taking a look at those and seeing how they could be incorporated as regulations. That would be my suggestion.
My concern is, I think Mr. Gaishel's right. We do need to look at those things. When we've kept it, obviously the last thing we did was pretty serious and we had a lot of obviously contention in that decision, right? Nipping off these little things, even though there's procedural time that takes place that has to happen and, you know, so on and so forth. If we bullet the larger, more important things that we are concerned about as a commission, because, you know, we're dealing with what we're hearing applicants or aggrieved property owners complaining about. I'm seeing that being a big thing that could help people not feel upset. I know we can get into what Mr. Gaishel mentioned, but that's my perspective is that people, you know, when we have those people come in here and go, hey, what the heck? I didn't know about this. I know no one wants to hear, well, you should have checked the paper. You know, it's like, that's not how you make friends. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not nice. So I think that's my inclination is to just say, hey, let's do that one thing and keep it simple. Cause it sounds like we're going to have a commission that's going to go, let's do it. Go ahead, Ms. Chantrell.
Yeah, just I guess to add to that, I took a lot of notes when we were discussing the regulation changes, and I just want to look through. I'd like to leave the agenda item open that we're just going to, if you could just say, add to agenda discussion of regulations to determine if maybe there was something else, because I'd have to revisit besides the signage.
Yep.
And then go from there and determine whether we're just going to do a sign or maybe some other things that we can loop in if it's, you know, if it's substantial enough or even little things. But I think let's just leave it open to discussion for next meeting.
That's a good idea. All right, so we don't need a motion, but we have a motion to add it to our next agenda. Might as well make it very official. All in favor, show of hands. Myself, Gary Upton, Phyllis, oh, be quiet, Bridgeport, Connecticut, you're nobody. Kristen, Jason, and Doreen. Thanks, guys. Somehow that turned into a big thing, but anyway, next item on reports, the Inland Wetlands Agent Report, Mr. Gaishel, administrative permits and commission issued permits.
So in regards to that, I can tell you, since the change in our regulations, I've got pending 4 applications. 2 are actually the work is within the 100 feet of a wetland. The other 2 is because the work is well beyond the 100 feet and within the 300-foot upland review area. Those are for a pool, a deck / patio, and 1 house addition, and actually, I'm sorry, 2 house additions. 16 Adawan Ave, 2-4 Park Lane, 29 Harvest Glen, and 24 Darrow's Ridge Road. One of the items I do want to bring to the agency's attention is our wetland permit database is a bit of an issue. Right now, it's a Microsoft Access database. And I've been working with IT to try to get it straightened out. But the issue we're having is that as I enter permits, it's writing over the permits that were issued, like permit number 1. So we're losing data as it goes forward. So I reached out to Ty and Bond, our GIS vendor, to see if there was any applications there that we may be able to develop in using the GIS to track and issue the permits and make this a little more efficient. The Microsoft Access database, the idea there was that it was compatible with the GIS software and you could actually track it by property. So looking into that, I just want you to be aware, we may go back to the kind of just the paper letter form for the time being until we can get a software system that will not overwrite our old permits. I still want to preserve that data. So it's at the same time, we also have a records retention. I won't call them requirements, but we're able to get rid of stuff. So I've got Jen, she's undertaking the task of going through all our old permits. We're only required to keep a copy of the old permit. And I think the site plan is that correct, Jen? So we're doing that. In the process, we're going to be scanning and digitizing all that information. It's roughly $500 a box. So hopefully as time goes on, the record keeping will be improved. That's all I have for now.
All right. Access, that's fun stuff. Mr. Debo?
I was waving at my wife, sorry.
That's all right. Hello. You can't, Gary, you can't dump that database off, rename it something else, stick it somewhere else, and then start writing to a raw empty database?
I think we can.
I used to run my websites back in the 90s off of Access databases, and I'd have to drag and drop the whole thing up, and it would crash on FTP, and it was, oh, it's so annoying. And it was always a thing of renaming. And what's up,
Yeah.
Jen?
Can I offer an explanation? One of the issues with that is in order for us to do that, we have to have the most recent version of Access. And while Gary and I on our, I'll call them our residential computers, at each of our workstations, we have the most recent version of Microsoft, the server doesn't. And that's where everything is stored. And that's, I think, the problem that IT is having, because they were waiting for the town to catch up with the most recent version of Access. So I think it's a budgeting issue. We just don't have that software yet. Hopefully that'll happen soon, but I know that was the issue as to why we couldn't do exactly what you just said, because that was what we asked for first.
Yeah.
But there was a reason they couldn't do it, and it had to do with not having the most recent software.
Here's to cloud computing.
Yeah.
Yeah. At least we've got one of our selectmen here. Here's to cloud computing. Sorry. But you guys are still on Windows computers, so good luck. All right. So anything else on there, Mr. Gaishel? I mean, so we've got a pool, deck, patio, and 2 home extensions, you said, that are within they sound, obviously, just based on what you said, they sound pretty straightforward, that we'll be able to take a quick scan over them and say, go for it, Mr. Gaishel. That was one of the things that I thought we would put into our regulation update, but that's a pretty big monkey to free out of the cage and get into the metrics of, in my opinion. But anyway, what am I talking about? But yeah, that sounds pretty straight ahead, right? Like if we can get a way in which you lay those, we don't need the applicant necessarily here for those applications, right? You can provide us copies of the applications and we take a quick look at them and say, yeah, it's administrative, go for it.
If that's how you'd like to proceed, the regs basically give me the discretion to issue permits within the upland review area.
Mm-hmm.
So I would recommend, if you want to go down that route, is revising that section of the regs to limit the agent's ability just to issue permits.
But you're saying that they do currently, you have a pool and a deck and a patio, nothing that sounds like Harry the homeowner stuff, right?
Right. I typically, in my day-to-day, is I would issue those permits and just report it to the agency that I've issued permits.
Yeah. I mean, if that's how it's currently written, right? I mean, how else would we attack it?
Didn't we talk about this, about that kind of defining what would be, I think you were talking about the low impact applications that you would just see, and I don't know if that needs to be defined or not. I don't know. Is it defined? It's not defined now, right? I thought we talked about this maybe like a year ago, but maybe I'm wrong.
The agency had a subcommittee, and during that subcommittee, they look at the regulations. That's where we had recommended minor, intermediate, and significant regulated activities. The minor activities being clearly defined as, like, say, these pools, decks, and sheds, that the agent was clearly, hey, this is my scope of jurisdiction. Anything above and beyond, it goes to the commission. That's something you can certainly take a look at if you'd like. That language exists. As the subcommittee had worked on that. I mean, you can also come up with some discussion and add different language. You can give me a directive and say, okay, show me all.
We lost him again. This happened last time. It's that time. His kids must be like enjoying, Furbies or something on the internet.
So if I may, it sounds like, what does the agency want to do for these applications? Do you want to rely on the agent to make a decision, then just to inform you? Or do you want to have a criteria by which the application has to come to you for review, consideration, and potentially a public hearing? I'm not sure, but you have a new regulation. How do you want to administer that regulation?
I mean, I think we always get these reports, like it's always been, Jen's always put this on the agenda, right? Jen forever, like administrative permits issued, and basically Gary usually goes into these things and he's always been very clear about these, so we know what's going on. I think it's been the intent of the agency just to know about these massive things that are happening, and I don't know that we want to get overly constraining with what is already a safety barrier. Please, by all means, someone else. Yes, please go.
I think the intent was that 10 years down, if we're working on the regulations anyway and making modifications, because we understand the process is challenging to do that. And 10 years down the road, or 20, and we have a new, someone in town hall that's new, like Gary knows what he's doing now. If someone new comes in, are they going to do the same thing? I think what Gary's doing is great. He's giving us updates. He's administratively approving, the pools and the decks. Does it warrant actual verbiage in the regulations? I mean, for someone else to take over, I think maybe that's where the discussion was the last time we had this, and we can touch on it again next week, just, when we have more members of the commission here as well, just to see where everyone stands.
And we had a draft at some point going around. We should resurrect that draft.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea. All right, well, I'd say we should hold this off to talk about it next meeting. And I think we've already proven that there's something to talk about. And anything else, Mr. Gaishel, on that agent's report?
No, I have nothing else. Thank you.
Cool. No enforcement issues. Obviously, that's probably underneath nothing else.
Correct.
Thank you. All right. Looks like it's that special time, and it's 7:50. So well done, crew. Do I hear a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting?
Sure, this is Phyllis Berger. I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
All right, and a second. I'll second that motion. All in favor, 7:51. Gary Upton, Phyllis, Kristen, Jason Diebel, and Doreen Ryan. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your help. Mr. Daigle, Jen, Gary, Sue, everyone have a great night.
Night.
Bye-bye.
Right.